Dusts it off about 20 times on his way to the net. The net's up, fires and scores!
Here's Tippett. He's got two. He looks for a third. He scores! A beauty for Tippett.
Moving in on Vanacek.
Barbieri steps in. Barbieri shoots. He scores! And this place goes crazy! Turn it up till you speak the whole.
Welcome back into another edition of the Silky Mitts podcast here on PSSN. We got the usual squad minus Tim Rogers, who couldn't make it today, unfortunately. The last episode, unfortunately, did not get uploaded due to technical difficulties of exporting stuff like that. So there's no record of Josh Bartosik saying Peter DeBoer is a good coach, but we all know that he said it.
And there never will be. There will never be videographic evidence.
I hate that.
Disastrous words, because what happened? The Stars.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Even though I picked them to win the series.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little later. This is our Stanley Cup Final preview edition. We already know how Josh feels. Desher, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
The draft is less than a month away.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much to say about that until maybe when we do the episode, but I have a little bit of history on my mind right now. I have a lot of storylines on my mind that I'm ready to get into. So when we get to that point, I will gladly talk about some history that I've, been thinking about recently.
Big history buff. Yeah. Anthony Desher. I'm excited.
I am a history buff. I do like my history.
So Josh told me before we started, because last year Josh went on a complete tangent, but this year he goes, it's not going to be me ranting. It's just going to be about me being depressed. But we'll talk about that later. We're going to start with the Western Conference Final. Some breaking news today and the coaching carousel. We had two coaches hired today. Spencer Carberry is now the new head coach of the Washington Capitals. Love that hire. He was, they've been looking at this guy for a while to succeed Peter Laviolette. And maybe a bit of a surprise. I don't think a lot of people were expecting this to come today. John Hines was fired in Nashville. He had a year left on his contract, replaced by Andrew Brunette, the former head coach of the Florida Panthers last year. And he was the assistant coach of the New Jersey Devils this year. So I guess, look, I'll start with Carberry. I love this hire. He's a really good coach. He was really respected. He was an assistant coach with the Maple Leafs this past season, ran their power play, which was second in the National Hockey League this year, which is something that Caps really need. They needed to shake up there because it's been the same for 6 years.
And yet there's been nothing wrong with it, because somehow Alex Ovechkin still ends up wide open in the left slot every single power play.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I don't get it.
So this year let's start with Carberry. He got 4 years, which was kind of surprising to me because, he's an inexperienced NHL head coach and you give him 4 years. But then I thought about it, and like, you know what? There was a lot of teams calling him. He was really, really wanted. And also, this is kind of the year over the next 4 years. So Alex Ovechkin has 3 more years left on his 5-year extension he signed 2 years ago. And this is kind of the transition year out of the championship. I mean, obviously no championship's going to happen, but you want to win as long as Alex Ovechkin, Nick Backstrom are on your team. So Carberry, 4 years, Ovechkin, 3 years left. This is kind of that transition into bringing up younger players from Hershey and closing out Alex Ovechkin's career. So Josh, what do you think? I like the move.
I think it was a good hire, honestly. Obviously, the term is something that you don't want to. It's rare to see a guy that doesn't have any head coaching experience get such long term. When you think about it, I mean, we've been seeing the same names thrown around. It's always the recycling of coaches. It's never a new hire. So it's always great to see a fresh face. And yeah, sure, he was an assistant coach for Toronto for so long, but he's never been a head coach. He's never been a head coaching spot. And honestly, sometimes teams need a fresh face. The league needs fresh faces. I mean, Andrew Burnett getting hired by Nashville, we'll talk about in a second. But I think you talked about the transition period. I think it is a transition period. I mean, obviously the Capitals are now in a mini rebuild of sorts. I mean, they're trying to rebuild / also make sure Alex Ovechkin finds a way to break Gretzky's record, which is totally possible. But it's a weird transition period. So honestly, these next 4 years are not really contention windows for the Capitals. So if they end up sucking, it doesn't really matter. You can't really blame the coach. That team's not going to be great. But if that team overperforms under him, then you can re-sign him. So it's not a thing where it's like, oh, we'll give him a 1 or 2 year deal, and if they suck, we'll let him go. Because the team's not going to be good. I mean, they have a top 10 pick this year in the draft. They'll probably have another top 10 pick in the draft next year if they don't end up moving on from guys like Backstrom and the older guys. Probably Oshie will be gone at some point as well. So you'll see a lot of turnover in Washington. And I think having a guy that is not expected to get you a massive 30, 40 win season for his first couple of years is honestly probably great. And he's a guy that can probably get the job done. I mean, heck, honestly, maybe he was the guy that maybe he's someone that could have gotten the job done in Toronto if he was given a head coaching role. We'll never know. But overall, I think it's a pretty great hire for the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, you mentioned that like coaches just, they are hired and then they get fired. It's all recycled. So getting that new fresh face in a room is something we've actually been seeing a lot all over the league right now, especially with my Flyers who, Danny Briere, he was, the general manager for the Maine Mariners, a team in another league. And he built his way up to be an NHL GM. They were trying to train him to be that. And then they hired Keith Jones, who, was an announcer for 20 years. And he hasn't really been in a job in a front office before. So they're 2 new guys. So, hey, if you're a guy studying journalism and you want to be an announcer for a team, don't worry, 20 years down the line, you might be a president of a professional team one day. But you're seeing it all over, especially with these assistant coaches. Brad Shaw, also from the Flyers, getting interviews by the Ducks, I believe. And, you say 3 or 4 years might be a lot, but that's usually the typical length of a contract for an NHL head coach. But they're just, you see the league doing it itself. They're going to this new window of just, getting fresh faces there and not having the same guys who've been in the whole thing for 30 years. And you mentioned Laviolette as well, who's getting interviewed by the Rangers, looks like the front runner. And I don't know how that fit's going to work when it's an all offensive team with an all offensive coach and they struggled with defense, but we'll get into that hopefully later. But it's a good move to get a new voice and maybe a shiny future for that shiny head.
Yeah. You know what? I think Washington had some unfortunate circumstances this year because of the health. John Carlson missed a lot of the season. TJ Oshie couldn't stay healthy. You didn't start the season with Nick Backstrom and Tom Wilson, 2 very important pieces, 2 major surgeries. So if they stay healthy, they'll be a good team. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but they're going to be competitive because they have those really good players. Now Dylan Strome, Evgeny Kuznetsov, who's probably out the door along with Anthony Mantha. So they're going to be a good team because of the guys that I just mentioned, but hopefully they play a faster style and they bring up some young guys, which we got a little bit of that taste last year, but there was, Peter Laviolette maybe not utilizing them enough. So let's move on to Andrew Burnett I don't think this is officially confirmed yet, but a lot of sources are saying this is pretty much done. Andrew Burnett is now the head coach of the Nashville Predators. This is the first move of Barry Trotz's tenure as the general manager, succeeding David Poile. Burnett, so remember he took over Joel Quenneville mid-season with the Panthers, and he went 58, 18-6, and was an assistant coach of the New Jersey Devils this past season. And John Hines, 4 seasons with Nashville, he was pretty good. They made the playoffs 3 out of the 4 seasons he was there, 134, 96 and 18. So are we a little surprised to see this happen?
No, I mean,
Why don't you go?
no, I mean, he won the President's Trophy with the Panthers. That's already a lot to the resume there. I mean, he played for Nashville, so it's not his first time in that city. And maybe Trotz, he let go of Hines just because he wanted his own guy. Maybe he just didn't like how Hines would, like how he would interact with him and stuff like that. But you might see that with Toronto too, depending on who they go with. Mainly probably Brad Treliving, but I think Burnett, even though because he got fired because it was a disappointing playoff run, so
Yeah.
he's getting that second chance, and I think with the talent that Nashville has, they're not going to take off. They're not going to be winning the Central, but they're going to be back on track to make the playoffs, probably as a number 1 wild card or possibly finishing top 2 in the division.
Right,
Yeah.
They weren't that far off.
The only reason they didn't make it is because they lost to the Jets in like game 81 of the season. And
No, they lost to the Flames. Or no, that was how Calgary got eliminated.
Yeah, because Calgary
won.
put out oh god, who was it? They put it in the fourth round of
in the shootout instead of Tyler Toffoli.
Nick Ritchie. It was Nick Ritchie they put out.
And Daryl Sutter got fired. So
yeah, I think it's a decent hire. I mean, look, I've never been a fan of John Hines as a head coach. I just don't think was really a guy that was going to get the
Devils fan.
I just don't think he was going to be a good fit. I mean, yeah, you literally ask any Devils fan, he was not a good head coach for them, but seemed to turn things around a little bit in Nashville. I am just surprised they didn't let him ride out the last year of his deal.
Right.
Especially considering that Nashville's a team that, like Desher, like Anthony, you were saying, they're a team that could be in the contention to make the Stanley Cup playoffs, but I don't think they're to be in the contention for a Stanley Cup anytime soon. Like, yes, their young talent really, really showed out in surprising ways this season. Is it sustainable or were they just overperforming? We don't really know. But you got guys like Philip Forsberg's up there in age. Matt Duchene's getting up pretty old in age. Roman Yossi's not getting any younger. I mean, you still have
Johansson
there. Ryan Johansson's a big piece that he's a big middle 6 forward for them. That's, I think, on the wrong side of 30, nearing upper 30s. But obviously you still have one of the best goaltenders in the league in UC Saros, who is like, they just go from generational goaltender, first Pecorine, then UC Saros, and when UC Saros is done, they'll have Yaroslav Askarov in the pipeline right now, who is
doing this with the net.
Yeah, bench pressing nets for fun because he's so cool. I love watching him play in the minors, but I don't know. I mean, Brunette's a guy that, I mean, look, he got the 1 year in Florida. They were really good. Terrible against Washington and Tampa, and obviously the year he leaves, Florida goes on and makes it to the Stanley Cup the following season. So there's not a lot of experience with Brunette coming in for a team like the Predators, who do have experience. Maybe it'll be better because Florida was a team that was so inexperienced when it comes to playoffs and just having that gel. I don't know. It's an interesting fit. Again, we were just talking about hiring new people. I'd like to see new guys. I mean, Brunette's just not a guy that I think has really proved himself to be a great head coach yet. But for a team that's just on the outskirts looking in, I don't think it's the worst hire. I can tell you a hire that I don't think is great, which is Peter Laviolette for the Rangers, which is most likely to be confirmed if we want to talk about that at all, which we probably should.
Yeah. No, so here's my take on that situation. And a lot of people will not agree with it. I actually think this is not as bad a hire as most people think. Because the problem with Peter Laviolette's system in Washington is because the team was so old and so slow. His teams require a lot. They're very aggressive. The defense like to jump up into the play, sometimes like even below the goal line. And that could lead to chances in transition, etc. John Carlson is not a fast skater to back check like that. Neither is Dmitry Orlov. Nick Jensen, maybe. New York, outside of Trouba, they have they have a young defense that can play that kind of style. Adam Fox is a very good skater. Keandre Miller is a very good skater.
Yeah, but that's not the kind of game the Rangers have ever played that made them successful, though. Like, they weren't a team that had pitching defensemen. They were playing like, look, when they played Carolina,
He's not going to like Capo Caco, though, because he hates young players. He's going to scratch himself.
Well, that's another thing. That team is very young.
Yeah.
The Rangers are
That's
not an
the one.
old team. And Peter Laviolette, his entire time in Washington, was blaming the younger players for the team's inconsistencies. So I don't like that hire on that note. And also, like, you talk about the defense jumping in. That's not something the Rangers are known for. That's something Carolina's known for. And the Rangers exploited that against Carolina in the playoffs last season. So why would you go and do that same style? And also the Panthers kind of exploited a little bit this year too, which we'll get into when we talk about that. But the thing is that the Rangers' main issue, I think, for the last few years has been 5-on-5 play. Like, they have a really good power play.
Laviolette's, I saw a tweet. He's decent at 5.
Middle of the pack at 5v5. That's a tweet. I'm actually looking at the tweets right now. He's been a middle of the pack guy. His last 3 years in Washington his teams were 18th, 15th, and 13th in 5-on-5. For a team that's middle of the pack, that's fine. But the Rangers are a team that's pushing for a Stanley Cup. No, they have no regards for long-term plans or anything like that. They are building to strictly win one Stanley Cup and nothing else, which is also why how they ruined their franchise and a chance for Henrik Lundqvist to get a Stanley Cup in the past. But Laviolette is not a guy that's going to take you to that promised land in this stage of his coaching career. It's not
I think that's also why, because he won a cup with Carolina. He had great success in Nashville. I'm just saying from the Ranger. I'm not saying I'm just saying from the Rangers' perspective, they want a proven winner to take them to the Stanley Cup, because Gerard Gallant, he took Vegas to the Cup final that one year, but he wasn't a guy that had a Stanley Cup. That's why I think they went ahead and hired Peter Laviolette.
Or they're supposedly going to hire him this week. I just don't like the fit, like, at all. I don't think he fits their style of play. I think he's going to ruin that. I mean, look,
But he's a good coach. He's not a bad
good coach, but for a guy that hates on younger players, why would you go to a team that specifically has a line called the kid line? That's going to, like, it doesn't.
Well, that's the thing. He's gonna have to. He doesn't have all those veterans like he did in Washington. He's gonna have to play the young guys.
Right, but why would you bring in a guy that's not used to playing younger talent on a team that's flooding with it, and a team that, for some reason, is going all in on a Stanley Cup push when they could have realistically, if they play things right, have a 10-year window, but they're not playing it right at all, and they're shooting themselves in the foot. I don't think this is a great hire.
It's not confirmed. It's not confirmed.
I didn't think that. Then again, when they made the trade for, like, Ryan Reeves and got rid of Pavel Buchnevich, I thought that team was going to be awful, and they ended up making the Eastern Conference Final. So it could prove me wrong. I just don't think Laviolette's in a stage in his coaching career when he can take a team with all that young talent. I think the game is behind. I think his best days are behind him, and I just don't think, for a guy that's a middle of the pack 5v5 producer, you don't go to a team that's been struggling to produce 5-on-5. They could not score 5-on-5 against the Devils, and that's what ended up killing them. So I don't know why you bring in a guy that is not a 5v5 specialist. I just don't understand.
And like I mentioned before, how he's a guy that preaches offense when defense really isn't the Rangers. It's not their really greatest strength. And that's what it really killed them in this playoffs, because they left Igor out to dry at least several dozen times.
Yeah. But, look, they're still going to be a playoff team. They're still going to be a Stanley Cup contender, no matter what coach they have. It's not like they're going to fall off a cliff because they hired Peter Laviolette. No.
It depends on the offseason moves they make too, because this is a team that built a supposed super team and did not even win 4 games in the playoffs. So
yeah, that
was a show that. Well, hockey's the one sport where super teams don't win.
Yeah,
nothing.
Boston.
Well, but that wasn't like a specifically constructed super team. That was more so homegrown talent, and they made the deadline to get better.
But still,
like, they were like, the Rangers were like, oh no, we're gonna get these guys that were really, really good in 2015.
Yeah, only
I will say, go ahead.
Only the mid-2000 All-Star team only really worked for Carolina. Even though they didn't really win, it still looks a lot better on them than the Rangers.
Dude, all I'm saying is that the Rangers Coyotes final, with you have all the Coyotes NHL legends on their Cap LTIR and
Shea Weber,
Weber,
Jacob
Pavel
Voracek.
Datsuk. That team's
Yeah.
legit.
The GM carousel is also a fascinating storyline. Like, I've heard teams are interviewing Peter Chiarelli, which I would love to see. I was hoping he would go to Pittsburgh because I want to see the Penguins' downfall.
Pittsburgh's
Anyways.
getting get Kyle Dubas.
I
There's-
know.
But one more thing before we move on. There's also reports of Gerard Gallant going to Calgary.
I was going to mention Gerard Gallant. Where is he going to go? He's a guy that he's not going to stay unemployed for much longer. He's a
He's a good coach for a good first year, kind of like Mr. DeVore, where he'll have a good first year and then he'll fall off, and that's what Calgary needs. They need a good year to get back on track. The Huberdeau trade obviously did not work out. Look what Matthew Tkachuk's doing. Look what Huberdeau's doing, and Huberdeau wasn't even going to sign. Remember, he didn't even want to be in Calgary, but then he gave in. But the Calgary just needs a push, and maybe Gallant would be the good move. He's not the long term as we've seen so many times before, but I think it would be a smart move as of now. But once Calgary really gets going and you start seeing those falls that Gallant brought into the Rangers while taking the back seat, you should get rid of him.
I think Gallant's not a bad hire because look, the main issue with yes, the Huberdeau trade looks completely lopsided versus what we all thought was going to happen when the trade originally went down. But also, for some reason, Daryl Suter was not playing Huberdeau in his correct position and just wasn't playing him he was playing him on the wing, which he's not a true winger whatsoever, and that also really didn't help. And Daryl Sutter, again, I don't know why I said Suter. It's Daryl Sutter. Sorry, Daryl Sutter.
I was going to correct you, but
he's not a dude that again. It's similar with Laviolette, but I think it's more apparent for Sutter. His best years are behind him. The game is not the game now is not the way that the game he knows how to coach is played, and so it's just. I think Gallant's a guy that could honestly bring back Huberdeau. Gallant was the coach in Florida when Huberdeau first started there, correct? If I remember correctly.
no.
Was he the coach?
Might
in
have
Florida?
been. I don't know. Just ask the taxi driver. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Huberdeau was there for.
Let me
Good
see. Hold
while.
on.
But as you look that up, I want to mention just in case.
It was Bob Buchner was the coach before Gallant.
Oh, all right. I remember what I was about to say.
Bob Buchner. So no, it was not Gerard Gallant. But it was Bob Buchner. I think it was him.
But you mentioned how things are behind their times, and we just mentioned Laviolette. Laviolette was very good in the early 2010s. Obviously, he won the Stanley Cup. Was that Carolina? I don't remember.
Is that sarcastic?
No, I'm saying Laviolette, he was very good in the early 2010s. He won a Stanley Cup when he was with the Flyers. They were very good. They went on a cup
He
run.
won it with Carolina.
He made.
He went to the finals with Philadelphia when they lost to Chicago.
Yeah, I was like 8 years old.
But
he was that was his peak, and then he's kind of declining as the game moves forwards and depth. So maybe we kind of see that with Laviolette, but that's just how I see it.
By the way, I'm 95% sure that Gerard Gallant was the coach. At least some point during his time, he was a coach when Huberdeau was there. I'm double checking.
Yeah, I mean at some point, but not when Huberdeau first got in the league.
Actually, I'm 95% sure he was there year 2. He was hired in 2014 by the Panthers, if I remember correctly.
Oh.
Let me find this.
Was there that long?
I think the taxi incident was
June 21st, 2014. He was named head coach of the Florida Panthers, and he was fired in 2016. Jonathan Huberdeau joined the league in 2012, 2013. So literally the next season. Which actually is really funny. He had 31 points in his first season, Huberdeau did. His second season was the last year without Gallant. He had 28 points, just 9 goals. The first year that Gallant was brought in, he jumped up to 54 points in 79 games. Gallant and Huberdeau seems to be a decent fit. Obviously, Huberdeau had his best season last year. But when Gallant was the coach for those few years, it helped kickstart Huberdeau's career. And I think it could help him reignite his career. It's not to say his career is done. He just had a terrible head coach in Daryl Sutter at the helm. And I think it really ruined his play style.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's enough for the coaching slash. I mean, we didn't talk about the GM carousel, but that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about the Stanley Cup Final preview. And first, I think we're going to talk about the West first because that was the most recent. Vegas. Just want to point out, I nailed that. I said Vegas in 6. It turned out to be Vegas in 6. All of you said Dallas. So thank you very much.
An hour later.
Huh?
I'm gonna leave the call now, if that's okay. I don't want to hear the because remember, do I not remember you saying you all know that the Canes Panthers series is going 7 games?
Yeah.
Well, no, the Panthers Maple Leaf series is going 7 games.
Yeah.
Neither one of those went to 6.
Yeah, I know. So
Jamie Benn was the problem.
Jamie Benn was the problem. Vegas completely dominated Dallas in every single game. Actually, except the games Dallas won, like game 5. Game 5, Dallas dominated. But the rest, Vegas, like Ottinger, I don't know if you guys heard, he was playing through multiple minor injuries. That's why he looked he wasn't that great.
Yeah.
So, and obviously, like goalie is one of the position where like you need to be 100% healthy or else your team's going to lose. And that is why I think Dallas is a good portion of the reason why they lost. I think a lot of inconsistency from their star players, like Jason Robertson didn't have a goal. Like he only had 1 goal in the Seattle series, and now he had 5 goals in the series against Vegas. Rope Hintz, I don't think was that great in this series, even though he's the leading point scorer in the entire playoffs. Tyler Seguin wasn't great. Mira Heiskanen and Joe Pavelski was great all playoff long. But just not getting enough from their star players, and also their defense kind of struggled, which is that Dallas is a team that's known for
Ryan
their
Suter was
structure.
the worst player on the ice at every single time.
He was not good.
Ryan Suter was awful. But I can tell you this thing. There were 2 big differences in these series in the Western Conference Final and the Eastern Conference Final. Like, yes, technically Dallas didn't get swept like Carolina did. But I think you can make the argument that Carolina still played significantly better than Dallas did in their entire series.
Yes.
They just ran it. Carolina just ran into a 120-pound Sergei Bobrovsky.
And that's the thing, is that Carolina made adjustments to try and beat Bobrovsky. They were the better team in game 2, 3, and 4. Specifically games 3 and 4, they were the much better team. Except Sergei Bobrovsky was just unstoppable. Game 3 was the turning point in that series because Carolina was peppering.
I thought game 2, Carolina. We'll get into that later, but I think game 2 they didn't play that great.
Carolina played fine until Carolina played great until the series went into any sort of overtime whatsoever. But the thing is that
my sleep schedule's still not fixed.
Dallas did not make any adjustments through the first 4, pretty much the entire series. The only adjustment that they made was when their captain decided to jump on William Karlsson's head.
Mark Stone. It was Mark Stone.
Oh, was it Mark Stone?
It was
Jimmy Benn's an
bonehead play. And he made it seem like it was accidental by trying to give up. Give me a break.
No, it's ridiculous. But like this is why it makes me so happy. Like, sure, I picked Dallas to win the series, but watching Pierre DeBoer once again fail to make adjustments when he plays a team that's better than him.
His former team.
Former team. Like 95% of the people on that team. You coach them for like 3 years. You coach them the mediocrity for 3 years, but you still coach them. Like, he doesn't make adjustments, man. Like, it's your job as a head coach to make adjustments. And yes, Vegas was miles better. But when it comes to goaltending, you have the better goaltender in Jake Ottinger versus Adin Hill. You have a better defensive system, or you should. You have better defensemen. Miro Heiskanen is one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. And you looked awful. You didn't even put up a fight in game 6 on home ice. You give 3.
They had like 1 good push, but that was like in the second minute of the first period. That was it.
Like and that's like, again, Pierre DeBoer. He'll bring you to he'll give you a deep playoff run. He will never ever win you a championship. Pierre DeBoer could have the greatest team of all time, and he had a fantastic Sharks team for like 13 seasons. They brought him to 1 Stanley Cup Final appearance where they got not embarrassed. They got beat by the Penguins, and then a bunch of Western Conference Final losses, and like the only notable reverse sweep of all time against the Kings. Granted, it would have been really funny if Vegas got reverse swept. I would have laughed. It would have been very funny.
All of us are rooting for Florida.
What was that?
All of us are rooting for Florida. No one likes Vegas.
series.
Yeah, I mean Vegas with the way they've done things Josh and I were trying to talk about this last night with Dadonov, Fleury, and it'll just trade away people for no reason for nothing. I never really liked how they did it. Just Leonard as well, Robin Lehner. Just from the start, I really never liked them. I mean, that's just me being maybe a hater. I just think they came in spoiled, even though that's probably most of the GM's fault for not knowing how to expansion draft 101 and protect your players correctly.
Georgia McPhee.
But I just never really liked Vegas.
I feel so bad for Joe Pavelski. If there was a player in the league that like deserves like a cup, like the most, like among active players, it's Joe Pavelski. Joe Pavelski is a workhorse, man. He's like 38 or maybe even 39, and he was so good. That man never ages.
He ages backwards.
The Flyers traded Claude Giroux a year too early. I would have loved him. I would have loved to see, because he went to Florida last year. They didn't do it. Now and Nolan Patrick, who I was so high on for as much as he was with the Flyers being the number 2 pick. I believed in him. If you had 1,000 fans,
El McCarr could have been a Flyer.
Shut your mouth. If there was one fan, I would have. That was me. I loved Nolan Patrick, and I wish he was healthy because I would have loved to see him in the Stanley Cup. And if it was Nolan Patrick versus Claude Giroux, that would have been so nice. But it's Bracco Goose.
We're getting Sam Reinhart versus Jack Eichel instead. Buffalo Sabres fans rejoice. They can bring something into the Stanley
Jack
Cup.
Eichel has been so good.
Jack Eichel has made it to the Stanley Cup Final in every one of his playoff appearances.
Yeah. That's the only thing Vegas really did good as an organization is let him get that surgery.
Jonathan Marchessault has been phenomenal. Aiden Hill came out of nowhere. Like, this is a really, really good team.
That's what's crazy, is that
Marchessault is also playing the team 11 go.
Yeah,
that's true. And Riley Smith.
And like I'm saying storylines. That's one of them.
That's actually a big one because those were the worst moves I think we saw at the expansion draft, was that they traded Jonathan Marchessault just so the Vegas Golden Knights would take Riley Smith, who both end up being perennial top 6 playmakers and guys for Vegas.
I believe
we thought it would send that Florida organization back years. I mean, only send them back like 6 years because now they're in the Stanley Cup Final. But
and when I'm talking about history, I said this is Vegas' 6th season, and if they win the cup, they will be the fastest expansion team ever to win the cup. The fastest team right now is my Philadelphia Flyers at 7 years. And yes, the Oilers did it in 5 years, but the Oilers weren't true expansion team because they came in from the hockey league that they were already formed in, and they moved over to the NHL. So the Flyers are still the fastest expansion team ever to win the Stanley Cup. And I hope that lasts for another 50 years, even though they won't win a cup and they'll have like a 100-year drought, because it is not sunny in Philadelphia right now, even though I do like what they've done.
Yeah. So 6 out of only 6 players that are on the current Vegas roster were on the team that went to the final in 2018 and eventually lost to Washington. We haven't even talked about the guys that have taken their game to another level for Vegas. 2 guys, Ivan Barbashev, 15 points in 17 games. He's been awesome. Chandler Stevenson, who won the cup with Washington that same year, and now he's with Vegas. 14 points in 17 games. He's been excellent. Marshall has been on another level. This team has so much depth. So I'm really looking forward to what they do. But yeah, I'm with you. They just played as a complete team against Dallas, and they straight up embarrassed them. I feel so bad if you're a Stars fan, because their fan base is I really like their fan base. Like, I like their atmosphere a lot. at
I
American
mean,
Airlines.
they share a fan base with the Cowboys, and as a Philly sports fan, I'm not complaining.
No, it's a good fan base out there. And I mean, again, Dallas is such a weird team because they went on that mini run in 2019 where they took the Blues to 2 overtimes. They made it to the Cup final during the bubble. They had some real interesting years, and this was honestly probably their last shot for a while. I mean, look, Joe Pavelski, yes, he is ridiculous, but he is also almost 40 years old, and Jamie Benn is done. I think this was probably the last week. He should not be the
He had a
captain.
good bounce back year, I will say.
Yes, and was awful in the playoffs, specifically in the series. He was horrendous.
Round 1, he was great. Same with Sagan, but gotta keep your foot on the pedal. All right, Josh, you want to talk about the Eastern Conference Final?
I'm just sad, man. Like, it's just
It felt like it ended like a month ago.
0-12 in the Eastern Conference Final. Josh, if you make the Eastern Conference Final, you'll win the Stanley Cup backwards next year.
Yeah. So everyone keeps bringing up that stat, by the way. Okay, so let's actually go back. The first time they got swept in that Eastern Conference Final, that was 14 years ago against the start of a Pittsburgh Penguins dynasty. That's a completely different team. People need to stop talking about that. 2019, Sacramento Lennon was on their first line that year, and they lost to a Boston Bruins team that realistically should have won the Cup. So I don't understand. This one, like, yeah, okay, 0-12, but it's not like they've made the Eastern Conference Final in like consecutive seasons and just can't win. These are so spread out. These teams have been vastly different year in and year out. So that stat is stupid. And what's also stupid is the fact that they're only the 6th team in NHL history to get swept by losing 4 one-goal games in a row. Just the 6th in history.
Okay, Rod said they didn't lose. Rod said they didn't lose.
No, he said they didn't get swept.
They didn't get swept.
They lost.
Which
They
I know
get
what he
swept.
means, but
But you have to agree with that sentiment. I mean, look, game 1, 4 overtimes. Yes, Florida was a better team in pretty much every overtime, but Carolina was a better team in the 3rd period. I think game 2, up until Florida scored that tying goal, Carolina was the better team. And
when did they tie it? I don't remember.
With about 5 minutes left in the 2nd period. It was on the fake between the legs goal from Barkov.
Because I was like, they didn't play that well in game 2.
They came out flying in game 2 to start. They scored 20 seconds in, and they scored another goal, but I got called back because of offsides.
See, the thing was for me, Josh, I don't know if you agree with this. I know I got heat on this for saying it like a group chat. I just didn't like the way Carolina defended. Like, I know they didn't give up a lot of goals, right? But there was just something wrong with their defensive system.
They turned the puck over way too much for my liking, specifically in those first 2 games. In game 1 especially, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of overtimes. There's gonna be mental lapses, but there were like 5 or 6 times in each overtime where they turned the puck over and it led to a prime scoring chance for Florida, and Freddie Anderson was just playing incredible. Game 3,
rare scoring chance they would get.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, and then game 3 and game 4 are the ones that really upset me because I understand. And again, I'm not going to say that Carolina got screwed over because they got beat by literally just Sergei Bobrovsky, because you could make the argument that Carolina could have been up 3-0 going into game 4. And honestly, Carolina could have swept Florida the other way if they got 1 or 2 bounces, but Bobrovsky was ridiculous. Like a 960 save percentage up until game 4. It was ridiculous.
He loses like 20 pounds a game. How is that possible?
A lot of goalies lose a lot of weight. I remember someone telling me like Braden Holtby lost like 15 pounds per game.
But it's just amazing to me because like game 3, there were not a lot of penalties called until they called the one in Carolina that ultimately led to the only goal of the game on a pretty soft call. I'm not going to lie.
I don't remember it.
And it led to, and like, it was bounces galore, and they lose 1-0, and you go into game 4 and they tied up with like no time left. They do all this stuff, like, great. It's fantastic.
Game 4, I think, was probably the best they played. Like, it was a close to a 60-minute effort.
Not the best they've played. That was the worst first period I've ever seen in the history of hockey.
Yes, that's right. That was the game where they sucked in the
Jacob Slavin got knocked into next Tuesday. PK Subban made fun of it online. Screw that.
That was ridiculous.
And then like Marty Natchez goes down, and Stefan Nason dislocated his shoulder in that game as well, and then came back. So like
That's right. That they did not play well.
periods
that
2 and 3.
period.
What was frustrating is that you can't take that penalty with a minute left in the game if you're Jordan Stahl. That also could have been his last game as a Carolina Hurricane. I don't think it is. I think he'll come back on like a league min con, like a
Which
Pavelski contract.
which sucks because I don't even think you could fault him for that because I looked. He's going for the puck. He makes contact with the puck with one hand, and then as he's putting his stick back in two hands. That's what made contact with I think it was Montour who drew the penalty. So there was just inadvertent contact, but I'm also
going to say this, and like people can like you can say whatever you want. Sam Bennett's stick was in between Freddie Anderson's pads, which prohibits a goaltender's ability to move over, which is also why the net was wide open with 4 seconds left. Like, and I understand, like, yeah, 4 seconds like that, but you gotta get the call right. And yes, it's not the blatant, a dude ran into the goaltender, but I think it was more goaltender interference than the goal interference that was called in game one because his stick is literally in between the pads unprovoked. Granted, don't let Matthew Tkachuk within 5 feet of the crease with 4 seconds left. He's got like 7 goals in the series.
He took the entire second round off to just do that in the third round. And when you talked about Sam Bennett, he was throwing hits that I haven't seen since the Broad Street Bullies. Most of them are clean. Most of them are clean. I'm not saying they were dirty hits. That was just unfortunate that Slavin had his head down.
It was a helmet. It was a helmet to helmet contact that.
I don't want to call it helmet. I think it was a clean hit all around. I wouldn't even call it helmet to helmet.
No,
it's just tough where his head hit the board and then hit the ice.
It was the thing. His head hit the board than the ice. His heading the board is the part that scared me. Honestly, that was the scary part.
The scary part was when he tried to get up and then he toppled over the net.
Well,
I think he tripped over. I think he tripped over the goalie. But
yeah, but also that was the moment where I was like, okay, even if Carolina wins this game, there's no way they're winning 3 more without their top defenseman. But that's the thing is that you mentioned the physicality. That's what Carolina is missing is physicality. They don't fight back. I mean, you didn't see anyone fight back, and yes, it was a clean hit by Sam Bennett, but no one fought back afterwards. They just let it happen. I mean, they don't have anybody that really throws a hit on that team. And when you're an opposing team and you know that you can take those I'm gonna call it cheap shots, not really a cheap shot, but you know that you can get away with stuff after the whistle or lay guys out and there's not any repercussions, you're gonna throw the body around more than you normally would. And that's what Carolina was missing. Carolina also, like, look, I can be upset and people can be like, oh, this was Carolina's best chance to make the Stanley Cup final because the other teams were out. No one expected them to make it past the first round. They were missing 2 of their top goal scorers. Technically, Patre is not a top goal scorer. He's played 3 games, or he played 5 games. We had 3 goals in those 5 games. He's a known playoff performer. Svech was on his way to a 40-goal season. So, like, they're missing 2 guys that are
Svech was like
and Teravainen for the majority of the playoffs.
Svech wanted to be in those games so badly. You could see on his face. His exit interview stuff I saw
broke my heart. Broke my heart.
Because Brent Burns obviously wants to be back too.
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously. Well, Burns is coming back. He's still got the 2 years left on his on like that contract.
My big issue, Josh, what happened to Conn Smythe, Jordan Martinook in the 3rd round? Where was he?
It wasn't sustainable.
That's what I'm going to say. Is that you can't ask a guy that's on your 4th line to get
limited time.
I know. I'm kidding.
When you're always losing.
I know.
But like that's the thing is that Carolina, they have some interesting decisions to make this offseason, man. I mean, look, everyone was like they were linked to a Matthew Tkachuk trade this past offseason, which so funny that he's also the one that ruined their hopes and dreams. But
Lindholm too.
Lindholm's a guy that I actually would love to see come back because he's a guy that they need, like, yes, Svech is great when he's healthy, and Patre is a guy that if he can stay healthy, you bring him back. But this team is not going to win a cup based on the what ifs of Pacioretty and Svech staying healthy or people staying healthy in general. You need to go out and you need to make big splashes. I don't think Gossifir comes back. I think he's going to get way too much.
They're selling. They're going to sell some pieces.
Bring back Tony DeAngelo, man. Clearly, obviously.
Ivan Provorov,
I mean, look, this team still needs, and I think the front office knows they need a legit physical guy that can also score goals.
Yeah.
Elias Lindholm can be that guy that can bring back. And Calgary honestly should be in a a fire sale of sorts. I mean, that team is just got no direction right now. So we'll see what happens. But there's going to be some choices that need to be made in the offseason. Not a lot of big contracts leaving this year. Stahl and Foster are big ones that they want to bring back. Obviously, they're two goaltenders. Have to decide between Anderson or Ranta to help with Kochetkov. But the big year is next year. Every single person that is vital to that organization is getting a contract next year. Sebastian Aho's contract is done. Teravayan's contract is done. Slavin and Pesci's contracts are up. Shea's contract is up. Seth Jarvis needs his big boy contract. Marty Necas needs a big boy contract. Like the entire team is going to be a restricted free agent or a free agent next year. So this year, this coming season, is their all-in push. And I think people have been saying that's why they didn't make a huge push and splash at the deadline, because we saw that happen with a team like the Rangers in Boston, both of which lost in the first round. But this is the next year. This coming year is their year, because if they don't make a deep run, I genuinely don't know if Sebastian Aho wants to stay with this franchise. Yes, he says he loves it here, but you could see the frustration on his face in that entire series. He was pissed off. He doesn't want to go to a team that can't get over.
Guy that
he might look Aho. He might.
it wasn't until like game three
Nashville is a big spot for Finns.
Don't stop. That would break my heart. I cannot see him in mustard yellow. I can't.
Now, that was another thing, Josh. Sebastian Aho didn't really turn it on until game three.
He literally had a point on every single Canes goal in this series, except for the last like two. He had two assists in games 1 and 2, like combined, which was 3 out of their 4 goals they scored in that series. Actually, those are all the goals they scored. 2 out of the 3. Sorry, he had 2 assists. He had 2 assists in game 1, and then he didn't do anything in game 2 because Jalen Chatfield scored 5 seconds in. Like it wasn't his. Like it's not.
That's my guy.
And also, if your top line consists of Sebastian Aho and Stefan Nason, he can't do everything. Like, yeah, you want the big step. Sebastian Aho, honestly, I gave him too much crap over the years. Over his time in the playoffs, he has averaged 0.92 points per game in the playoffs over his career as a Carolina Hurricane. That's pretty good for a guy that's your franchise. And he turned into a franchise superstar this offseason, these playoffs. Like, yeah, he wasn't great against Florida, but when Florida's defense and their physicality was getting to everyone on that team and they just could not do anything with it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not Aho's fault. And there's some people that are like, oh, some people are like, oh, fire Rod Brindamore. Like, what? Like, what are we doing? Like, you cannot, like, some people are so dumb. Like, oh, get rid of Aho, get rid of everybody. They're so bad. Like, I honestly genuinely believe that if they had Patrick, if they were fully healthy, they win this series with ease and that's another, I will say this is that game 4 stings a little bit more because they finally got to Sergei Bobrovsky, because Bobrovsky did not look like himself in game 4 at all. He did not make like a 10-bell save or a ridiculous save in that game. And if Carolina won that game, maybe he continues to cipher off and cool down, which we can talk about when we get into the Stanley Cup Finals, that Bobrovsky might be reaching the end of his selling his soul to the demon status that he's been going on these entire playoffs. But I don't know. The offseason is going to be interesting. I'm still proud of that team because they did a lot better than everybody thought they would without 2 star players. So I think they'll be fine. Next year, there's a lot more at stake, though.
Yep, I'm with you. All right, with that, let's get into our final. Florida Panthers. You told me that Florida Panthers would make the Stanley Cup Final and they would play Vegas. Well, I mean, not they would play Vegas. Some people expected them.
If you would have told me that the Florida Panthers if you told me in January that the Florida Panthers, a team that like 15.
Thank you, Pittsburgh.
What a butterfly effect, man. Pittsburgh Panthers lose to Chicago.
But that just shows all you have to do is get in.
Well,
you just got to get in.
Is that Florida was basically playing playoff hockey for the last 2 months of the season, whereas Boston wasn't, and where we talked about on the last podcast, so I don't want to get into it again. But honestly, this is look, one of these teams is winning their first ever Stanley Cup, so I'm not really.
Yep. Last time we had that was 2018 when Vegas.
I would just hate to fly to Florida to Vegas to Florida to Vegas to South Beach to Vegas. Like, a couple
time
times.
difference.
Yeah, I'm not that would drive me nuts. But
I
these are
think there's
professional
probably going to be
players.
like 2
They don't
days
care.
off in between like game 2 and game 3.
Maybe, but I don't really see it. But the Panthers, I'm not going to say, I knew this all along, but because I didn't really think they were going to be that good in the playoffs because they were so offensively inconsistent. This team won the President's Trophy last year. So I think there was a part of that team where the depth is really good for both teams, but the Panthers had that ability to, take it, like they had it. They know how to win because they won the President's Trophy last year. So maybe that's it. But we all thought that the Matthew Tkachuk trade was terrible for Florida. Because they lost 2 pieces in Huberdeau and Weegar.
And a draft pick.
Yeah, and a draft pick. And they got Matthew Tkachuk. It was a 100-point guy for a 100-point guy. And he's just been so good. He's just the player he is, his personality and just what he brings. He's like, you hear of a 5-tool player in baseball who knows how to hit, who has power, has speed. He's one of those. He's a 5-tool player. Like he can get into those areas. He knows how to play. He can score goals. Like he can lead a locker room. Like he's very good. And all of a sudden the Panthers, like as a Flyers fan, I'm like, we have their first round pick next year. That's probably gonna be like pick 29. I thought it was gonna be like pick 15. I think they have this. This is what the Predators did. They snuck it in 2017. I think this is what it's going to be for the Panthers, even though they had a good year last year. They're going to be one of those teams that are going to be in contention for a long bit of time now, since they have that confidence boost that they can make damage, or they're going to be a team that it's like, all right, we don't really care about the regular season. We make the playoffs, we're going to make noise. I actually don't know. I went on that whole thing. I don't even know what I'm getting out of that. So
Just that Florida's a weird team, man, and like. Going back to Matthew Tkachuk, yeah, he destroyed my entire franchise. Like, he destroyed my team in every single game. But at the same time, you can't hate the guy. Like, his personality off the ice.
Great NBA analyst.
Dude, he's going on to the NBA halftime stuff. He's talking all these, like, he's a fun guy.
He knew Jason Tatum, who did not make the final.
It's good for the league. It really is good for the league. And I mean, it's good for Florida too. I mean, look, that's a fan base that has seen a lot of struggles over the years, like for a long time. But look, when that team makes the playoffs, South Beach gets rowdy out there near.
They have 2 teams in the championship right now. It's crazy down there.
Yeah, Miami and Florida. So they could be like the first team I think ever or in a long time to have 2 championships won like at the same time by
should have been Philly.
But okay. I mean, look, Florida is tough, but I was mentioning this a little bit, is that Sergei Bobrovsky, like, I don't know if it was just me because I watched, but he did not look as superhuman in game 4 as he did the other 3 games, which makes me wonder if he's going to taper off slightly in this series. I mean, it's certainly possible because Vegas is fully healthy and has a lot of firepower, more firepower than Carolina by a mile. I mean, that entire team is stacked to the brim right now. So it's really just like, I don't know, it's tough, but also like if Bobrovsky goes down, you still have a guy Alex Lyon who
Started the playoffs.
And
both these goalies didn't start the playoffs. Aiden Hill didn't start.
True. Aiden Hill, yeah, that is actually.
Bob didn't start. Like,
Very
you talk about what if Spencer Knight, what if he had a smooth year where he didn't really, have, what was it, personal issues?
He had to go. Yeah, he went
Yeah.
to the rehab.
Yeah. What if he played? Where's Bob in this situation?
It's a whole bunch of what ifs, man. I think this is gonna be a ridiculously good. I think it's gonna be such a fun series because both these teams can score goals at will and can also shut down opponents at will. I mean, Florida was doing that when
Florida's defensive system has improved so
It's
much. They put it on a defensive clinic.
How does a defensive system with Mark Stahl on the second pair give up like 4 goals in 3 games? It's infuriating.
It's working better than Ben Sherratt did. So,
and Aaron Ekblad has stayed healthy.
that's a bit. I'm so happy that he has too, man.
I
'cause
just
could not catch a
And
break.
I just don't
Brandon freaking Montour. Where is this guy? This guy came out of nowhere and is their best defenseman.
he was another guy on Buffalo. Like the
Yeah.
Sabres, like they get rid of these guys. You can't blame him for Jack Eichel because that was, but like
You can't blame him for Jack because they refused to let him.
Florida has won
That's
11
what I'm
out
trying
of
to
its
say.
last 12 playoff games.
Yes, I only know that because they only mention that every 5
Yeah.
seconds with the Canes
Yeah,
here.
and you said, "Oh, you can't say Carolina hasn't been hot."
Yeah, because they were because Carolina.
There's no stopping it. That's why I think Florida's winning the cup.
I don't
Florida's
know,
winning.
on like
This thing's going either way. I have no idea. I would love to see Florida just because, like I said, I've never really been a fan of Vegas, and I like the whole 2012 LA Knights thing they're going on right now.
I like the
even
underdog,
though-
I really do.
Yeah, I really do. And
Did you say LA
Even though-
Knights?
Kings, same medieval terminology. All right, so but I would just even though Florida's seen a lot of championships in hockey with Tampa and now South Beach or Sunrise or wherever they play at this point.
Sunrise, I think, but
Yeah,
stadium's
it's going to be fun. And people say that, well, it's boring and blah blah blah. Both these atmospheres are very good. Florida, they're beating the no fan accusation right now because they've shown up during the playoffs. So I mean, I like I said, I would love to see Florida win. I have no idea how this is going to go. I have no prediction. Last year, I said the Avalanche, and I always, even though I wasn't with you guys with all this stuff, I thought the Avalanche were the team. And I'm usually right with these things. Dating back to like 2018, I had the Caps. Pat yourself on the back, Cheris. Good job there. But you know, I always knew who would win. But this time, I just don't. I don't.
really don't. It's
I'm
so
confident.
Like, because
I'm confident
the Panthers have played so well, but the Knights are so good, and there's no, I can't think of too many flaws.
It's
I'm
all.
absolutely right. It comes down to goaltending.
Yep,
It
I was
comes
just about to
down
say,
goaltending.
Bobrovsky has just been so. He's been too good right now.
Yeah,
And
but again, this is my thing. He was not good in Game 4 against Carolina. He was not. He looked like a normal goaltender, not the dude that stole games 1 through 3 for Florida. And that is why it's a little concerning. Yes, Aiden Hill hasn't been like stellar. He's been really good, but he hasn't been like Bobrovsky level. And that's the thing. It comes down, if Bobrovsky can keep the same form, and we also have to understand that I think this Florida Panthers team, they have gone the longest. This is like the longest break between a team playing in the conference final versus playing in the Stanley Cup final because they swept and then they were like all like the 3-day breaks and whatnot. I think it's gonna be like almost 2 weeks since they last played when the series starts. So that's a long time off for Florida.
I mean,
Panthers.
it must be nice after the 4 overtime, just getting a break.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if they're complaining too much.
I don't know, but I'm not saying they're complaining. But again, long breaks have a tendency to cool teams down. They do, but they don't. It depends. I think it's gonna be a fantastic series. I would love. I mean, I can't honestly.
You know what? Does Sergei Bobrovsky win the Conn Smythe either way?
Yes.
It
Yes.
can go to a
Well, not
it can
either
go
way,
to
but
a
if-
player
if-
from the visiting team
I
or the losing team.
No, if Vegas wins, I think it's going to go to
Barbashev,
Marchessault.
or Marchessault. He's been really good. Barbashev has been like crazy.
Yeah. If it's people say, well, Matthew Tkachuk, no, because he didn't
gonna
really
go
have a good second
Bobrovsky.
round. It's going to be Bob.
It has to be
If it's
Bob.
a-
He's the reason why
if it's
they're
Florida.
here.
He's the reason why they
Mm-hmm.
won round 3. Simple as that. He is the reason they beat Carolina. And
Without him, they're probably out in the.
Well, it's for the whole playoffs, and Bobrovsky has been.
yeah,
so
they say
good.
the whole playoffs, but it never has been the whole playoffs because Ryan O'Reilly won it. I think Ryan
2019.
O'Reilly won it in
Yeah, he
2019. He only had a good Stanley Cup final. The better player. It should have gone to Binnington, if anybody, that year.
Do I look nervous?
But I mean, look, if we're gonna make predictions,
Yeah, let's do it.
my heart says Panthers because God, I want to see I want to see Eric Stahl get another Stanley Cup so bad. I really do. But I think that Vegas has too much firepower, and I think that the Demons finally get exercised for them. I say Knights in 7, maybe even 6.
I don't know. I'm gonna say either Florida in 4 or Knights in 4, or Florida in 5 or Knights in 5, or Florida in 6, Knights in 6, Florida in 7, or Knights in 7. I'm gonna use
really
all
good
of those as my prediction because
There's
I
no
have
good
no idea.
Florida in 6. I'm fully confident in that. This team is scorching hot.
They haven't played in 2
Scorching
weeks.
hot.
I think
What?
Jokinen, he comes down like WWE. He joins the Panthers.
You
And
see
then you
Jokinen
have-
or Ola Jokinen?
And my
And then maybe-
consummate winner is Sergei Bobrovsky.
Yager.
I don't think it's close.
I think he has to win
That's-
either way. I think he has to. I
And
mean,
it's-
unless he gets pulled in this series. I don't know.
It's on TNT, right? The Stanley Cup, right?
Yes.
That's what they were saying at the end of the thing. Like, oh, we'll see you in the
Good.
Stanley Cup,
I like the
which I'm
TNT
actually kind of
broadcast.
happy for because I don't really like the ESPN broadcast, especially intermission reports.
Yeah, I've never really been a fan of them.
I'm on
And
board
so
with the
I'm
PK Subban thing.
I'm the only one that has Florida. I mean, Desher, you never really gave the prediction. But
I want Florida, but I just don't know if it will be Florida.
yeah, no, I'm confident. I'm confident it's going to be the Panthers.
Yeah, because that's never worked against your favor ever, Jacob Cheris.
It did in the conference final,
You
Josh.
didn't say with full confidence.
Yes, I did.
No,
I didn't
you.
say those words, but I was very confident.
You're also confident the Canes Panthers series was going 7. So
Yeah, whatever.
and you're confident Peter DeBoer is a good coach. So
Hey, your words, not mine. You
I
said it last time.
Where are they? Where are they? Find me the evidence. Find the evidence. There is none.
Hey, Phil Kessel, he's on the Knights.
I forgot
He
about
He
that.
couldn't be. He couldn't get a
Four,
reaction.
you know, win or 3 Stanley Cups. He hasn't even played, right?
No,
I don't think he's played a lot.
no.
All
Just-
right. So, with that, that's going to do it for this edition of the Silky Mitts podcast. When we come back, we're going to talk about the draft. Desher's going to pretty much run that
Yep.
whole show. And yeah, hopefully we have a good series. Hopefully it doesn't go like 4 because that's kind of sucked. Like we had a day without hockey because Carolina decided to lose. Anyways,
You know what, Cheris? Next time, have your team make the playoffs, and then we'll talk. How about that?
I wish.
Team hasn't won a first round in 5
I'll
years.
see you guys in the playoffs in like 8 years
When Tony DeAngelo is captain.
when he's a general manager of like the Utah Coyotes. I don't know.
Have a good day, everyone.
The Salt Lake City Coyotes.